Hello, this is Alexandra Talty here with South Fork Sea Farmers, a conversation with Chris Paparo. I'm really excited for today's episode. For many of you, you might know Chris as the person behind the Fish Guy photos on Instagram. For his day job, he's the manager of the Marine Science Center at Stony Brook, and he has some of the best wildlife photos of the East End. So it's going to be a real treat. We're going to go through hear the stories behind his photos on his Instagram, and hear what's up on our seas and on land as well this spring on the South Fork. So, Chris, I know you have been spending a lot of time out on the water blue fishing recently. In fact, as early as this morning. Can you talk a little bit about this season? And we have a photo from this morning, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's as the fish guy, I spent a lot of time on the water, and fishing is what got me into marine science as a profession. And so I get out there as much as I can. But right now, there's been a big run of bluefish, a lot bluefish. I mean, I got some drone footage the other day. There had to be thousands of bluefish just schooling up in the shallows in Shinnecock Bay. And I went out this morning with a good friend of mine, Michael Fogg, and I was flying the drone, taking pictures of him catching fish and video of him catching fish, which is exciting. So you see here, he's got a nice sized
Wow.
bluefish on the line. That was like a 12-pound bluefish. So, and he's in a kayak, which is even more exciting. So it's he gets like a little bit of a sleigh ride this morning, getting pulled around by these big bluefish.
That's what I was wondering because I've only gone blue fishing like from a dock or on a boat, but I feel like the surf casting from the kayak, that is
Yeah, it's
spicy.
intense, because they got big teeth, so he's standing on a kayak and pulled around. Then when he has to land it, he's got to unhook it without losing a finger, So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
always a little bit more fun, but yeah.
And is this an earlier time than you usually see bluefish, you'd say?
No, it's right around time usually. It's usually early May. Sometimes as early as late April they'll show up, depending on the season. But this year it seemed to be right on time.
And one of my favorite things about your Instagrams is I think you often kind of tackle myths, or you'll post things right as people will see them, and there's a lot of engagement locally around that. How did you kind of start your page, and what has that journey brought you?
It started really for me. It started as I had dreams of being a Nat Geo photographer. Sitting somewhere exotic, trying to get a picture, and you quickly realize that those positions are really difficult. You usually have to have a big money role to be able to not work and sit someplace for that right opportunity. So I then started using the photography that I was taking to just use it as an educational tool. I started out writing for local fishing magazines, wildlife magazines, and I turned that into a lot of lecturing, which is what I do more these days. But I just wanted to share the local stuff here on Long Island because I don't think people really appreciate how much cool stuff is right here in our own backyard. So that's what I try to do. Is just I don't typically focus on the negative. I try to focus on the positive.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that people are interested in is like positive environmental stories. One I know that you followed very well, especially it's the third photo on your Instagram of the ospreys, our local ospreys. You give like a blow by blow. There's Mary is the third photo in. Can you share a little bit about them this season?
Yeah.
And
So Mary and Raoul. So Mary is the female. Raoul is the male. They're at Southampton College. We had some grant money a few years ago, and I was asked what could we do with it. And I said, I want an osprey platform outside my office. So we put up an osprey platform, and a pair nested. And now ospreys will return to the same nest every year. And we wanted to name them, and we started having naming contests. And then the names that were coming in, I was like, oh, I'm going to be stuck working here for the rest of my career with like French fry as the name of the osprey. But I got to thinking, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna name them Raoul and Mary after Raoul and Mary Welker. So I went to Long Island University at Southampton before it was Stony Brook, and Raoul Welker had retired, but Raoul Welker founded the research center at Southampton. Again, he was retired when I started there, but he hung around quite a bit. Got to know him really well. I wanted a way to preserve the history, so I named him after Raoul and Mary. And his family is thrilled about it. Ann Welker is a Southampton trustee. They come quite a bit to watch the osprey. Mary herself rolls into the parking lot and she checks on the kids and sees how everything's going. And it's just been good a way again to bring back that history. But with osprey, they were wiped out due to DDT years ago. In fact, when I told Mary about this, she had told me that Raoul used to hand out the Silent Spring to his students in the 60s, and that was about the plight of the osprey and DDT. It was the first environmental movement. So she said he'd be honored to be named after an osprey and thrilled that there's osprey at the college that he founded. So it kind of worked. It's a really good thing all around, and it gets people aware of these animals.
I had no idea that Ann Welker's parents were so involved with Stony Brook. That's
Well,
great
it was
news.
Long Island University.
Oh, yeah, the
prior.
marine science
But that
stuff.
marine center was there because of Raoul in the 60s, late 60s. He was the one that founded the research center at Southampton. And so now it's Stony Brook University, but there's a big, rich history of research that's taken place there.
What a great homage. And with the ospreys, I know I've heard like sometimes when people watch them or they get really into them and then there can be kind of violence and death. What have been some of the dramas that you've been in between with broadcasting them?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So yeah, I love sharing pictures and stories about what's going on. But yeah, it's nature. So nature can be cruel. We've been fortunate the last couple of years. There's been plenty of fish. So often what happens is they'll lay 1 to 4 eggs, and there'll be a couple days in between each egg when they lay them, which means a couple days as they hatch. So I'm expecting Mary's eggs to hatch either today or tomorrow to start. But then the last egg might not hatch for almost a week later, and they grow differently at that time. So if there's not a lot of fish, that first sibling will outcompete the younger ones, and sometimes will kill the younger ones just to get the food. So it can be pretty brutal. Luckily, we haven't seen that with our nest. We have had some instances with plastics, though, garbage. Raoul, on 2 occasions now, has brought a plastic bag to the nest. Luckily, though, we have our research vessel that's perfect height for the nest, and we can roll in. Captain Brian gets us right next to the nest. I can reach in, pull out the garbage. So I've been policing the nest to make sure it's clean. So far, so good. We haven't had any issues. But yeah, nature can be cruel sometimes.
That's good. So you have a plastic ban for the nest.
Yeah, and every time he brings something, I tell the family, I'm like, Raoul brought a bag in again. We got to yell at him about that. But it's kind of, it's not funny with the plastic, but it's just kind of gives it personality, which I think people latch onto a little bit more when it's just a bird.
And what else do you think has kind of contributed to the return of the ospreys? I know that's like one of the very positive environmental stories.
Banning the DDT not only helped them, but eagles, peregrine, falcons, pelicans, anything that had a tie to mosquitoes and fish, pretty much. Other things, though, is, the habitat's getting cleaner. We've put up more they nest on telephone poles, but we put up a lot more nest platforms. And just so as things around them clean up, they make their own comeback.
And so another one of your recent photos, it's the 9th down, and that I really like is the tagging of the horseshoe crab.
Yeah.
And I know it's the breeding season. If you want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so horseshoe crabs, they've been around for 350 million years. It's a living fossil. They've been around since the time of the dinosaurs. And I was given some tags by New York State DEC. They know what I do as a writer and promoter, so they're like, hey, why don't you take some tags, because then I can help get the word out also. So I walk the beach every morning if I'm not on my boat, and I found this particular female, and I tagged her. And it's got an ID number, and then what will happen is if someone finds that, they can report it. So it can give you where they maybe migrate to, how long they might live, where they're spawning, do they come back to the same beaches. So there's a bunch of different questions that could be answered by tagging them. But again, it's kind of a citizen science thing too. So, people can do stuff like this and help out.
And so if people see the tags, you would encourage them to report where they are?
Yeah, and there's instructions on the tag. You can call it in, report it. So it gives you part of like that whole part of science, like being part of it, like learning where they are, where they come from. I've gotten a couple banded birds where I've gotten pictures of the ID numbers. So there's a peregrine falcon, for example, that lives at Ponquag Bridge, and I was able to get all the numbers, and I found out that bird was a chick in 2019, tagged in Cape May, New Jersey, and now she resides in Hampton Bays. So it's kind of cool to see how these animals can move around.
And what, for the average citizen, for them to understand, like, what does that give scientists?
Well, we don't, it gives us a lot, because a scientist can only do so much as one person, but if there's all these tags and then a lot of eyes out looking, then they can get these type of data points that they couldn't get on their own. So reaching out to the community is a great way to kind of get that extra help. And people enjoy it. It's not work usually for those people. It's a fun thing.
Yeah, I know with the shark tracking, people get really into that.
Oh, yeah.
Although that can also lead to people then, I've definitely been at the beach in the summer and someone's like, there's a shark at Jones Beach. Like, is it okay? I'm like, I think we're okay in
Yeah.
Southampton.
But so stuff like that though gets people curious. So all of a sudden, like search for example, they tag all those sharks and they all have names. I mean, Mary Lee has a bigger Twitter follower than I have, and but everything that she's tweeting is getting people excited and like they're not scared of sharks as much, or they're at least curious. Let me learn a little bit more about these sharks. So I think the more engagement you have, the better.
Is that one of your hopes with sharing all of your natural stories on your Instagram?
Yeah, I just want people to appreciate your own backyard. I think, again, often you get constant in the news, doom and gloom. The bay is polluted, there's brown tide, rust tide, fish kills, all this kind of stuff. So then when somebody comes to you and says, we should recycle or we should not use fertilizer on our lawn, the idea is, well, who cares? Everything's dead. I want green grass. It's not going to affect anything because everything's already dead. But then if I'm able to show them, like, there's whales right off of Cooper's Beach. You can have your toes in the sand and watch a humpback whale jump clear of the water. Or osprey in your backyard. All of a sudden they're like, oh, there is some cool stuff still here. Or, wow, things are getting better. Maybe I should think twice about fertilizing my lawn or, throwing that plastic bottle, out. Maybe I recycle it type of thing. Or not use it in the first place.
Definitely. I do think those natural stories can help connect people and, think about their consequences.
Yeah, and it's, a lot of it too is we get the idea of like, oh, there's nothing I can do. It's such a big problem. But if everyone did little tiny things, it adds up and it makes a big difference. But I think, again, getting people excited about the environment is our best hope for cleaning it and fixing it.
And what are, you spend a lot of time on the water, both as a scientist and recreationist. What do you think would be like one of the easiest changes someone could make to have a positive impact on the South Fork?
Don't use balloons.
Okay.
That's a good one. The reason I bring that is it's balloon season right now. Graduations, communions, Father's Day, Mother's Day, 4th of July. These are parties where people release balloons. And balloons do a lot of damage, I've worked for many years in this field. I used to work at a rescue center and whatnot, and I can't count how many animals I've seen that came in that were dead because they ingested balloons or other trash. And to me, it's a real simple one. Just don't buy them. Don't buy them. If you have to buy them, don't release them. But that's an easy. Just don't do it. Other things. Recycle. Think about. When you go to the grocery, the bagel store in the morning, the deli. Do you really need to put your egg sandwich in a bag? No, I can carry my egg sandwich. So leave the bag for someone that might need it. Just little things like that makes, if everyone did that, it would make a big, big difference.
And with the balloons, I know right now there's a project going on, balloons for sharks.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So one of the other hats I wear many hats. If you follow my social media, I'm into a lot of different stuff, but I'm part of the South Fork Natural History Museum Shark Research Team. And one of the things that we do to help fund our research and bring public awareness is the balloon problem is a balloon fishing tournament. So people can sign up. It's an app. You download the Fish Donkey app. It's a free app. You download the app and then you pay.
Fish Donkey.
Fish Donkey. Yeah, It's a weird name. It's an app that is used for fishing tournaments. So we've worked with them to kind of like rework it for our balloon tournament. And you download the app. You search SOFO, it'll pop up. You enter, it's a $25 entry fee. That money helps fund our shark research. And the goal is to catch balloons by land or sea, in the woods, on the water, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Wherever you find balloons, you find a balloon, you take a picture of it, you log it on the app, and whoever gets the most balloons gets a trip for 2 to tag sharks with us this summer. And there's other prizes as well, but that's the grand prize.
That's like such a once in a lifetime opportunity.
That's almost like Shark Week. You're getting out on a boat with researchers. You're not sitting on your couch. You're going to be there doing it with us. So, and again, it's a way to help us fund our research, but bring public awareness to the balloon problem. There's so many balloons out there. It's sickening. It really is.
I've worked as an ocean lifeguard, and the amount of, I think the average person, if they knew how many times you like end up rescuing balloons from the ocean, it's just shocking. And now I think after COVID, it's even worse because a lot of people were doing like
those virtual
because
birthday
you couldn't do anything, so it became this like nice thing.
And see, and that's the thing with the balloons. Like, I like to really think that when I see a plastic garbage bag on the ground or some sort of trash on the ground, that it accidentally got there. blew off a beach blanket, fell off a boat. Balloons are there because people released them. That 99% of them are because they were released. And the other 1% are probably because they were tied to a mailbox for an open house or something, which again just broke loose and stuff. But it's an easy fix. We don't have to release them.
Yeah, or even, I mean, there's other things we can do as well.
So many more things. And besides the balloon and the environment, there's a helium shortage, in the world right now. And helium is used in medical industries for really important stuff. So would you rather have somebody get sick and possibly die because there's no helium, or send a balloon up? It's just not worth buying it.
Do you feel like the local laws regarding balloons are helpful? I know there's been a big pushback, but
I think it's helpful. The problem is though, like where we are on the east end of Long Island, the balloons that might get released here drift out to someone else's problem. The balloons we find here are coming in from the west. So until like states, counties, countries to the west of us, it's because they drift around. So
right now I don't think you can buy like the really metal ones in Southampton.
Yeah, some of the towns are a little bit different, but yeah, there's laws on releasing. It's banned.
Yeah.
And up until a couple of years, it was completely legal to release 24 or more balloons per day per person. If you release 25, you broke the law. But it was crazy when we read that law. I'm like, this can't be true, and it was true. It was a Suffolk County law. So it was, so that's changed. That's not allowed anymore either. But again, it was bringing awareness to it. People. Every time I post a picture of a balloon, I get more likes on that than some of my really cool wildlife pictures. And it's not because people are liking it. It's usually then the comments are, I hate balloons. I pick them up all the time. So there's, again, getting people more aware. And I've had people tell me, I never knew. They just didn't know. They just assume it goes up and it's gone. So again, if I can bring awareness to that, I've had a lot of people tell me I'll never do that again. I didn't know. So again, it's just getting people aware.
And what are some of the, you have a really cool video recently of the mud, or I think it's a photo of the mud snail eggs on seaweed.
Yeah. So a lot of my followers, and I welcome this. Sometimes it could be a little slow getting back, but I welcome people sending me a message like, hey, I found this really cool fish, or hey, what is this odd thing? And lately I've been getting a lot of these questions about these little white dots that people are finding all over stuff. What are they? So the other day I was at the beach and I was like, oh, let me turn on the camera and tell people what they were. And they're mud snail eggs. And this is the time of year that they spawn, and they'll lay their eggs on seaweed and rope and cages and different, crab cages. That's why a lot of times people will be like, oh, what is this? And
guys, just tell me when I am getting close.
I think it's the one with seaweed.
you passed it. It's fairly recent. Up. Oh, it's not.
Oh,
It's not
maybe.
there. Oh, I'm sorry. It's the second one on the left, down under the blue fishing one. Yep. There we go. Yeah. So that there is a cluster of mud snail eggs, and each one of those would be little snail eggs. But again, when you see that, you don't realize what it is. To some people, they thought it was trash. They thought it was some sort of microplastic that was getting hung up on seaweed.
Oh, wow.
And there's a whole cluster, and then there's a whole pile of mud snails laying their eggs. And mud snails, most people don't know what they are because you can't eat them. They're not commercially bought, so most people don't have an idea what it is, but they're an important part of our ecosystem. They're detritivores, which means they eat dead stuff.
Okay.
So they're kind of the cleanup crew. So like you go to a salt marsh and put a fish carcass on the bottom, within minutes there'll be snails coming up out of the mud with their little noses, kind of sniffing it down, and then they'll get on there and they'll feed on it and clean it up. But yes, it's just another one of those things that people walk over every day and just don't know.
So it's a sign of a healthy ecosystem.
Yeah.
To have all those.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You need all that stuff too. Often people are like, oh, I hate, mosquitoes, for example. We started with that with the DDT.
Yeah.
We've been trying to kill mosquitoes since man first walked on this planet, right? Because they suck, literally, right? And but the problem is, if we were ever successful at eradicating mosquitoes, we'd have a whole environmental collapse because so many things need mosquitoes. Fish need them, birds eat them, bats. So again, just because we hate it and it's an inconvenience for us doesn't mean it's not important in the big picture. Then the next question I usually get when I say that is, well, what about ticks? Because let's face it, we all hate ticks. But again, ticks play a role. They're food, and sometimes people don't want to think about this, but they're also, in some ways, population control by spreading disease to try to keep everything in check. But again, they serve a role, a purpose as well. But when things get out of balance, it's when there's a problem.
Yeah, and that's when we see. And you have a photo of a tick. I think that's a deer
Yeah,
tick.
that was a Lone Star tick.
Oh, it's a Lone Star one.
That got a lot of traction, and that was just a tick crawling up my leg, and I couldn't believe, there it is, right there, yeah, and that's a Lone Star tick, and they call for that white dot. But one of the problems with Lone Star ticks is you can get a disease called alpha-gal, which is an allergy to meat, and I know some people that got deathly sick from that, and but it's a major problem, But why do we see so many ticks? Well, there's a population imbalance. Something that used to eat them is no longer here. My opinion, and some of my colleagues agree, quail, bobwhite, was a small little bird that used to would be very abundant here on Long Island. They're not here anymore. Habitat destruction, feral cats. Is that why? Because that's a bird that would eat ticks. They're not here. I know in my backyard I got chickens just to keep the tick population under control in my yard, because I'm in the heart of the Pine Barrens and couldn't have people over because they go in the backyard and they find ticks. So we threw a couple chickens in the backyard and no more ticks.
Really?
Or a lot less, noticeably less ticks. Yeah. So, but quail and chicken, kind of the same style bird, eating the same kind of thing. So maybe that's it.
And I do feel like that's one of those things, like the tick population has really gotten out of hand. In my lifetime, I've seen it change a lot. And then at the same time, loss of habitat, a lot more development, not as many places for those kinds of wild birds.
Right, and all those things that kind of keep everything in check. There's something to keep everything in check. I don't care how big and powerful you are in the ocean or on land. There's something bigger or stronger or in some way that could eat you or take you down.
And do you have any good tick prevention tips?
I'm working on a patent to tie my chickens to my legs. But other than that, sprays, and I'm always looking. There's a lot of different sprays, and there's a lot of people trying to figure out what's really effective these days. So there's a lot of recipes out there for homemade stuff too. But me, I just kind of am diligent in looking.
I'm a big believer in the checking.
Yeah.
And I think a tick has to stay on you. It's 24 hours
yeah, I
to
believe
get
so.
limes.
But still, I don't want them biting me anyway.
No.
No matter what. But yeah, so I try to, I keep a lint roller or at least a roll of duct tape in my truck so you can kind of pat them off.
Right when you get out.
Yeah, so stuff like that to help get them off. But
And
yeah,
high socks really, at least for me, I've noticed high
you'll
socks
see them
are-
too, especially if it's a light colored sign.
Yeah.
It just stinks because there's a lot of really cool places that I find in the winter months that I would love to come back in the summer and check out. Because that's the thing, a lot of your habitats change seasonally. So what's really cool in the winter might be awesome in the summertime, but the ticks kind of keep me out of the woods.
Yeah. I once went hiking in Hither Hills, but didn't really think about it. And in June, and it was I got out and I had 20 everywhere. And you want to be carefree, but then it just takes so long to find them all. And
Yeah. No, it's my wood duck. I've been posting a lot about my wood duck, and that's just over the fence of my property. And if I have to go back there to check it, it's brutal. I get it attacked, and I'm only going 10 feet into the woods, and like you said, I'll come out with ticks all over. So it's that's why I watch by camera now, just to be safer.
Can you share a little more about your wood duck? This is an ongoing saga.
Yeah, it's
If you don't
ongoing.
follow Chris on Instagram, the wood ducks are
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So years ago, I'd put up a screech owl box because I'd had screech owls, and there's the babies and the whole drama and everything. So I had put up a screech owl box that got taken over by squirrels. And then
is that a common threat to these?
squirrels. It's hard to keep them out. They like those cavities as well. But I one night I remember being in my backyard and I heard a whistling sound, and I look up. And I'm like, it's a wood duck. Where is it? And I'm on the Peconic River, so I'm maybe 200 yards from the river. And I hear the whistling, and I'm looking. I find it. It flies over my house and flies right into the box. And I'm like, no way. That was cool. And then it flew out an hour or two later. So I got a ladder and I climbed up and I opened up the box and I look in and there was a whole pile of eggs. I'm like, no way. So I'm like, all right, this is cool. So I watched it and they ended up hatching, but I never caught the hatching. The second year it happened again, but raccoons raided the nest. So I put up flashing to keep them
So they
out.
ate the eggs?
Yeah, they climb up and get the eggs and they eat them. It's nature. As I mentioned earlier,
yeah.
It could be cruel. But I didn't want them eating my wood ducks. So I put up some flashing on the tree, and then I went all in during COVID. And I dug a trench 80 feet to the back of my property to run electric. I got Wi-Fi to run from my computer to the kitchen to outside. I bought a fancy camera. I did all this stuff so I could watch. And last year they had 13 chicks hatch. And I wasn't home for this, but I had remote cameras everywhere. So I was watching it on my phone. I had a camera inside and outside. We watched them jump out. And then I went back and played the outside camera. And I'm like, oh, look at this, 1, 2. And I'm with my in-laws. And we're watching. And all the ducks jump to the bottom. Mom's with them. And then all of a sudden, Mom runs. I'm like, what? She disappears. And a red-tailed hawk comes in from left, grabs one, and flies off and out into the distance. And then Mom comes out, gathers them up, and runs them to the river. So I was like, no way. I mean, again, cruel, but it's nature. That's
Yeah.
So this year, I had the same setup. But this year, I happened to be home. And I put a tent in my backyard. And I sat in a tent for 4 hours on the morning. So what happens is they hatch, and then 24 hours later, they jump out. So once they leave the box, they're gone.
Forever.
Mom takes them to
wow.
the river. So they nest in there. She'll lay an egg a day. When she's done laying her eggs, then she starts to incubate, and it's about 30 days later. And then they hatch, and like I said, 24 hours. They bounce around in the box. I mean, you can go to my YouTube channel and see the whole. I condensed the 24 hours into like a 40-minute clip. And you see them running around, and then she jumps out, calls to them, and then one by one they jump. Now, my box is about 15 feet up, but they can jump as high as 40 feet.
Wow.
And they bounce like a little rubber ball, and then she walks them to the river. So this year I sat in it because I wanted to get pictures of the jump. So I sat in a tent for 4 hours, and it was a cold morning. I didn't prepare. I didn't bring food. It was like my dog was watching me the whole time, like, why is he outside? And I can't, but we had 15 chicks jump this year, and I got pictures of all of them jumping out, and it was pretty wild. So, but now I have another hen laying eggs. So yeah, so I'm the fish guy, but as you can see, I'm into all sorts of stuff. And anytime I run into someone, their first question, how's the wood ducks? Any more wood ducks? And
Yeah, I feel like the comments on the wood ducks
neat.
are like people are really enthused
And then
following
having
along.
that camera is a look that you can't get. Like, so the other night my alarm went off because I have a motion alarm in the box. And I'm like, oh, what's raiding the box? I was, nervous. It was a flying squirrel. And it stuck its head in just to look. I got one picture and it jumped back out.
Really?
Last year I had a screech owl go in, sit down, move around, looked at the camera. I think you could probably see the infrared and was like, I'm out of here, and hit left. I've had
Is it
gray
this guy up
squirrels.
here?
Yeah, so those are the wood ducks. That was the day before, the night of them getting ready to jump, I should say. You can see they're big and they're fuzzy. They jump all over Mom.
And that's just after one day.
Yeah, it's fuzzy, big how quick, how fuzzy they get.
Yeah,
but
because
when-
other ducks I feel like take like a while.
Yeah,
they were
they-
kind of wet for a while.
They're wet for a little bit, but they get fuzzy quick. And what's funny is when you watch over the 24 hours, like they would bounce around like this for maybe 15, 20 minutes and then sleep for 15, 20 minutes. And then Mom would try to sleep, and then all of a sudden they're jumping on her again. And what they do is they don't have preening oil at this stage of their life. So by rubbing all around her, they're picking up some preening oil, which waterproofs them a little bit. So when they do hit the water, they're good to float at least. But again, that's 15 chicks. Maybe one will survive to adulthood. Yeah,
That's always the hard part for me with these nature
Well,
stories.
right, I mean,
I
like-
have to say.
Yeah, I mean, like that one last year. I mean, they were out of the box, and the 13th one got hit by a hawk like that.
And Mom was just like,
Well, she ran because if she got hit, they all die. So she hid herself. Hopefully, they only give one, and then she could take the rest. But then once they get to the river, there's largemouth bass, snapping turtles, bullfrogs, all these things that will eat baby ducklings.
and they'll stay with their mom on the river.
Yeah, for
Oh,
as long as
okay.
they can, and then once they're big enough, I think it's about 6 weeks, and then they're able to kind of get out on their own. But it's a long 6 weeks where you can't fly and you're kind of stuck on the ground.
So, okay, let's just, for these ducks, you have infrared cameras, you have motion sensors,
Yep.
you dug an 80-foot trench, and you have Wi-Fi,
Yep.
so it's like a full-time feed.
Yep, I could turn it on my phone right now and tell you what's
What
going
else?
on.
Am I missing anything?
And I could record everything, and then I had to get remote access to my computer because if I'm not home, I need to be able to turn on my computer, hit record, and all. Yeah, so it's. But you know what? What's fun is it's my backyard, and that's the thing too. I try to push with this is people can do stuff in their own backyard. You don't have to be in Montauk. Well, we want to be in Montauk. Montauk's great, but I mean you don't have to be in some exotic place or deep in the woods or out 2 miles off the beach. You can sit in your backyard and see cool stuff. And especially during COVID, I was trying to push that a lot too. Like I just go in my
Yes.
backyard and take a picture of a spider or a what do they call the ant lions, where they these little things that dig holes and trap ants and stuff. So but it's in your backyard, but most people don't look. They just go somewhere else.
I love that. And I think also, when we started, you were talking about like this want to be a National Geo videographer, photographer. I mean, you're obviously at that professional level, but you don't even have to travel, so you've set it up in this way, which I think is a good message for people to realize, like, hey, let's protect what's around us.
Sure. Yeah, and that's the most important. Start here. Yes, there's problems all around the world, but I think we have a bigger impact if we just look local. Help a local organization, help a local group. Just know what's going on in your own backyard, I think, is so much more important. It comes to that little thing, If we all did a little thing, we all protected our own little backyard, I think we'd all be better in a bigger picture.
Definitely. And speaking of that, so what fish species have you seen change in your lifetime on the East End?
Winter flounder. Kind of makes me cry a little bit. I was like, winter flounder used to be super abundant. That's the first fish I ever caught. That's the fish that got me hooked into fishing and fish and marine science. And I have not caught a winter flounder hook and line well over 20 years.
Wow.
It's just a fishery that got overfished. And then you throw in the brown tide, which killed the eelgrass, which is important spawning habitat for them. Then you get climate change with warming sea temperatures. All these kind of bad storm of, I don't want to say perfect storm because it's not a perfect storm, but and we just haven't made a comeback. And it kills me because I said I can taste them mentally. I can smell them mentally, but you just don't see them like you used to. So that kind of, anytime I find one, I'm always excited that, there's still a couple here, maybe one day, but yeah.
And is that because of, all of, there are a lot of reasons that you listed, but is that mostly the decline of the bays?
No, I think, the initial hit was the two-hit was we just fished. I was guilty of it as a kid. Me and my dad would catch 100 to 200 and bring them all home and do that again on next Saturday. Because the idea back then, and the only way you can judge a successful day of fishing was how many fish you came home with. It was not, hey, I was on the water with my dad. Hey, we saw a seahorse. Oh, we saw a hawk. It was how many fish you come home with. Because everyone has that picture in their family somewhere of winter flounder on a picnic table, all up, belly up, white side up. Look what we caught,
Yeah.
We all have that, but now for me that's just not as important. Like if I even catch a fish, like today I did more filming and pictures of my friend fishing because that was more enjoyable to me, So so the overfishing and then getting hit with the brown tide, without, we lost 70% of our eelgrass beds in the 80s. So that's a big hit, and it's slowly coming back, but is it coming back fast enough? And then again, the bay temperatures are a lot warmer than they were. There's still winter flounder to the north of us in Massachusetts, places like that, but just not here like they used to be.
And so speaking of kind of changing fishing patterns, I know we've spoken about this before, and I know like a lot of recreationists will see tropical fish, also called drifters. I remember as a kid, like doing the catching bait fish with my dad, and like one time we saw an angelfish, and I thought it was like the most exotic, coolest things instead of the shiners, But what is that, and is it a sign of climate change? Because I know a lot of people think that tropical fish means that, we're living in the Caribbean all of a sudden.
Yeah, anytime I post a tropical fish on my social media, usually right away someone's like, climate change, see, I'm like, I got to stop and be like, look, that actually has nothing to do with climate change. These fish have been drifting here ever since the Gulf Stream started moving north. Now, the Gulf Stream is a river of water that comes out from the Caribbean, runs up our coast, gets about 100 miles off of Montauk, runs up a little further, and then goes over to Europe. And that affects our weather. So why do we have a much colder spring, like fog? The East End is in fog until July usually.
Yeah.
Because our ocean is so cold. And then we don't see snow until December, January, because the ocean's so warm, it just gives us that sloppy mix, But as that water flows north, fish eggs come with it. Larval fish drift on, and then they settle on our south shore. And it's not that the Gulf Stream hits us, but you get little eddies that break off. So in years where you have a lot of southeast wind or south winds, you'll get these little eddies. So
in the spring?
Yeah, throughout the summer, from now through the summer. So last year, it was all over the news. You remember there was the salps that were washing up. These little jelly-like things that would be all over the beach, thick. I remember one of my friends, she's like, I had them in my hair. She couldn't get them out. And they're tunicates. It's a sea squirt. It's a filter. They're actually more closely related to us than jellyfish. They're
Really?
chordates. Yeah, so it's a weird critter, but distant, very distant. But they live far out in the ocean, and when the winds are blowing just right, it pushes them in. But that also pushes in tropical fish. So last year was actually a pretty good year for collecting tropical fish. The last 5 or 6 years haven't been that good because we've had a lot of winds out of the west, and all that does is kind of push coastal water. So we're not bringing in that tropical stuff. So it varies year to year, but it's not a sign that of climate change. If anything, climate change might stop us seeing tropical fish because it might change weather patterns. So instead of getting those southeast winds, which were used to be predominant, now we get the west wind. So that might change things in that. But like finding butterfly fish and angelfish and groupers on Long Island is definitely not a sign of climate change.
And what happens to those fish?
Depends on the species. So fish like butterfly fish, angelfish, things that are kind of tied to a reef that don't migrate will perish. They'll just die when the water gets too cold. And it seems sad, but I always like to remind people that nothing goes to waste. So like a butterfly fish that's getting cold in the winter time or the fall was an easy meal for, say, a black sea bass that's now going to migrate offshore. So it gets some easy calories instead of fighting to get calories. Other fish like your jacks, look-downs, crevalle jacks, groupers, they actually will migrate back offshore because that's what they do. In their native range, they'll go to deeper, shallower, they'll actually move. So some species live, some don't. Most of your adults that swim here on the Gulf Stream, like tarpon, like big 6-foot tarpon, will actually turn around and go back south again. But often you hear people like, oh, I wish we'd get more tarpon. Well, if we had more tarpon, then there might be a problem down south too. You know, 'cause some of that stuff is also, there's an edge to like some of these things is more of a climate shift. So like last summer, there was a lot of the spinner sharks that were all over the beach. That is not a tropical species. That's more of a climate shift, a population moving north because of warming oceans. So like spinner sharks would be common south of Jersey, but now because things are warmer, they're hitting Long Island with regular abundance.
Yeah, I've been hearing this from a lot of the commercial fisher people that I work with, or scientists as well. Like basically our waterways are kind of becoming what Massachusetts is, and we're becoming what New Jersey was.
Yep. And that's a problem in places like Maine. So black sea bass, which locally is one of my favorite fish to eat. It's an abundant species, but never was there in the Gulf of Maine. Now they're in the Gulf of Maine. And you might think, well, it's a new fishery. Problem is black sea bass eat lobsters.
Yeah.
So now you have a multi-billion-dollar lobster industry in Maine that's getting gobbled up by black sea bass that are not technically supposed to be there. So yeah, so like you said, everything is kind of shifting northern. And so that's more of a sign of climate change as opposed to a butterfly fish being here on Long Island.
Interesting. And I know in Maine right now, they're very worried because there's like a monocrop kind of with the lobstering. They've had a lot more species available to them like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, one fish that has come back that I know a lot of people are happy about out east is the bunker.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, and then what are the positive effects that we've seen from that return?
Sure. The Atlantic menhaden, better known as a bunker, go further north, they're called pogies and fatback. They go by a bunch of different names, but it's a greasy, oily fish that you cannot eat. And if I tell you you can't eat something, you can't eat it. Because I'll eat anything. I've even tried to fillet a bunker because I was.
Oh, really?
Because one of the things I like to do is eat things that people would say are garbage, trash fish, and yeah, you can't eat it. It was gross. I didn't eat it. It was just the whole process.
Is it just
gross.
really fishy?
Really oily. So they feed on phytoplankton. They're filter feeders. Bunker was the substitute for whale oil back in the day. So you go out to, I guess it's the Nat Peak, that whole strip, Promised Land, I think. That was,
yes.
Those were rendering factories for bunker. I can't imagine what the smell must have been like back then. But it was a fishery that was unregulated. So, because you can't eat it, so in the eyes of most people, it's not important. If you can't eat it, who cares? Native Americans would use it for fertilizer. Then there's two fisheries for them, where it's bait fishery, so they use it as bait to catch better things, tuna, shark, lobster. And then there's a reduction fishery where they grind it up and reduce it into other stuff. So fish meal, cat food, makeup, fish supplements, things like that. And again, it went unregulated for forever. And then one day, just painting a picture a little bit, like there's a table like this and there's a bunch of managers around. So striped bass manager, fluke manager, bird manager, whale, dolphin. And they all have problems. All their animals, all their study subjects are declining. the one common denominator among all of them was they all eat bunker. So the idea was like, wait, well, maybe if we regulate bunker, it could help all of this. So they started putting caps on how much could be harvested. And within a short period of time, you started seeing giant schools of bunker, football field-sized schools of bunker. And as they returned, you started seeing striped bass, bluefish, sharks, tuna. There's been a lot of bluefin tuna inshore lately. Most importantly, and my favorite thing, are the whales and the dolphins. So, they've made a comeback. The humpback whale was almost hunted to extinction. And Long Island was a whaling port. We were a shore-based whaling port. They'd sit on the beach, see a whale, ring a bell, they'd go out, kill the whale, bring it back.
The right whale.
The right whale, the right whale, which is almost gone. And then they would do the same thing with the humpbacks. Now they've been protected, so their numbers started coming back. Water's starting getting cleaner. The food returns. Now humpback whales in the Atlantic are no longer listed as threatened or endangered, which is a huge success story. And because they're here and their food is here, they're back to their old stomping grounds. But there's no one alive today that remembers when their whales used to be here. So it's a new phenomenon for a lot of people, but it's something that had been happening way before any of us would have known. So it's exciting. And like I said, Cooper's Beach is one of my favorite places. You could sit at Cooper's Beach in the morning, cup of coffee, and watch a humpback whale just jump clear out of the water feeding, which is known as lunge feeding on bunker.
Yeah, that's been really cool to see, because I definitely feel like, there's something very majestic about the return of the whale, and it makes you think maybe we are hopefully doing something right.
And that's kind of my point. There's a lot of good stuff happening. There's bad stuff, of course, but there is. I hate when the bad stuff overshadows all the really good, the positive things. So again, I think we can get more done if we all realize that it's been working.
And then can we talk a little bit about the Woodhole Fish Dam in
Sure.
Riverhead? I think the Instagram
It was maybe a week or two ago, I guess. It was.
It's like a wooden
It's
photo.
up a little bit from there.
One, two.
Up a little more. Right there in the middle is one of the pictures, in between my dog and the gulls. Nope, not that. Not that one. That one, yeah. So Woodhole Dam is a dam that was built during the cranberry bog days up in Riverhead. It's right across the street from the county center in Riverhead. And again, it was dammed up to flood that cranberry bogs for harvesting the cranberries. It's been there for well over 100 years. The problem is that is a stream that would be a spawning ground for alewife, which are known as river herring, and American eels. And because the dam was there, the fish could get to that little pool that's right in front of the water flow, and that's as far as they can get. And for years, biologists were moving fish over the dam by nets. I'd helped several years help move some fish. It's not an easy task. But by moving them up, they would spawn, and then those fish would leave, go back out into the ocean, and come back next spring. And the thing, just like bunker, they fuel an ecosystem. So as those fish go up there, eagles, osprey, river otters, all these other animals that feed on them depend on that. So what they started doing last year, and I've heard this for years, it was, all right, they're going to build a dam. They're going to build it next year. And it's 10 years, 15, like my time of thinking about it. And then finally this year it was built, and it is awesome. It's finished, it's complete. The picture I was just up was a construction picture. But what now happens is fish have access. There's a whole set of these little dams, and the fish are able to hop over, and they get up there to spawn, and then they bounce back down to go back out to the ocean. So again, it's just another way of us helping the ecosystem and bringing more up that way.
And is this pilot project going to be replicated? Because I know in Southampton, like at Big Fresh to the Peconic right there, like that used to be very easy for the alewife to get back, and now because of roads and people's houses, it's become more difficult. And when you talk to people, you hear their stories from like 50 years ago. It was very different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and this is something that's happening a lot. So any of these places, there's a lot of fish passages either being put in, or in some cases, they're just pulling the dam and letting nature take back over. When I posted those pictures of the construction, I had a lot of people question, like, we shouldn't be doing that. We should just pull out the dam and let it go to natural. In my opinion, again, sometimes that's a good idea, But in that area specifically, like Woodhole Dam, it's such a pristine environment. It's a really pretty area. It's not full of Phragmites and all these invasives. It's got otters, spotted turtles. So to pull the dam, you didn't get rid of all those animals. And it's going to take time for it to rebuild. So me personally, it's like, oh, let's put a fish ladder there and fuel that already pristine ecosystem. There was one in Westbrook, which is Oakdale, I believe, that the dam failed. And now it's a big giant meadow, and it's pretty, but now it takes a lot of work to keep the Phragmites out and the invasive species out. But again, I think it's case by case, but I know in the Peconic, they're pulling out all the dams, or at least not pulling them out. I mean, I'm putting fish passages at all the dams. So now they can get to Wildwood Lake, and then they're going to be pulling. There's one by Snowflake Ice Cream in Riverhead, and then there's one at Forge Road. Once those two dams are replaced, those fish can get all the way to the headwaters of the Peconic River, which again puts a lot of fuel into that ecosystem, which I think, and fish like eels, they're also having a lot of problems also. So by increasing their nursery grounds, it can only help the population of eels as well.
And we still don't really know like how they spawn or
That's
anything
a whole
about. I love the eels.
That's a crazy thing now. So I mean, like the eels, it's believed they spawn in the Middle Atlantic Ocean, an area known as the Sargasso Sea. Their larvae, known as glass eels, they're only a couple inches. They're clear with two black eyes. They swim inshore. They find fresh water. They go up a stream into fresh water. They stay there for a couple of years. Then they come back out into the bay. They stay there for a couple of years. And at that point, they call them the golden eel, which is what we would see as people use for bait or food. They're about 2 feet or so, and they're kind of blackish golden color. And then from there, they migrate into the ocean and turn into the silver phase, which is the adult. They go out in the ocean. They spawn. It's believed they die at that point, but that's 50 years. And so in theory, any eel that you eat or use for bait is never reproduced. So it's a tough fishery to balance because you can take so many. Usually it's let a fish get to maturity, spawn a few times, and then you can harvest. But with something like an eel, they never spawn. I mean, they never spawn if you've eaten one. So, but by giving the increase in this habitat, then hopefully the population will be stronger also. Yeah.
And I feel like you also share a lot of recipes or kind of ways to eat these wild foods. What is your favorite way to eat a bluefish? 'Cause I love bluefish, but you can cook it wrong. Or someone can, not you.
And it's not only cooking with bluefish. Don't get me wrong, bluefish is an oilier fish. It's not for everyone, but it's not trash. It's not garbage. If it's cared properly from the moment you catch it to the moment you eat it, it's delicious. The two I kept this morning, I'm probably just going to broil, a simple broil, because it's just quicker and easier. My favorite recipe, though, is ceviche.
Really?
Bluefish ceviche. And I make it for the students at the college. Last summer, I brought in 10 pounds of bluefish ceviche, and it didn't last 5 minutes.
Wow.
Gobbled it right up.
What do you, because I've heard different like old wives' tales about putting them on ice right away or letting them dry or bleeding them.
Bleeding and icing right away.
So like on the boat you'll.
Yep. And then my other little trick is I don't let them touch the boat or the rocks or the beach or the dock.
What do you mean? So
I grab them, bleed
Okay.
them, ice them. I usually put them in
So you
water.
grab them from the net off the boat. Okay.
Yeah. Bleed them, ice them, and I put them in a live well until they're dead.
Put them in the live well till they're dead. Then you bleed in
on
ice.
ice. No, I bled before.
Oh, wow.
Then on ice. Because what happens is when they bounce around on a boat or in a cooler, they bruise. When the meat gets really mushy, when you fillet it, it falls apart and it's a bruises blood, so it's fishier. So if you do that and you, again, take good care of it, the quality of the meat is delicious, it's firm, it's crisp. And then when I fillet it, I'll trim out some of the dark meat because that is where all the fishiness is. That's also where if there's anything bad in the fish, like PCBs and things, that's where it's going to be stored. So
okay.
Trim out some of that, and it's dynamite. Like I said, I've made it many different ways for a bunch of people that always tell me they hate bluefish, it's garbage, and they're always like, that was bluefish? Like even this last weekend, I went upstate to a writers' conference, and I brought 3 pounds of bluefish ceviche, and right away everyone's like, I've heard bluefish is gross. That didn't last 5 minutes. I put it on the table and it was gone. And these are all people from upstate that generally like their white perch, yellow perch, plain white meat fish, nothing fishy, and gobbled it up, So it's just on how it's prepared and how it's cooked. You could take filet mignon and make it taste impalpable if you don't do it right, So it's just treating it. Again, you don't need to take 10 of them because they're not going to freeze. Take 1 or 2. I took 2 for dinner tonight, and that'll be, fine. And I'll go and catch a few more, I'm not against fishing and keeping food. I eat a lot of seafood. Just do it responsibly,
Yeah, I think that's a really good message. And, there's so much we can do now with like drying fish or
smoked bluefish, grog blue.
Have you ever
blue
done
is my
the
favorite, too.
smoked, like, there's those new, like, smokers, they're really small on the market?
Oh yeah, I have a
Oh, you
smoker.
do?
I'll make smoked bluefish that I'll then vacuum pack and freeze it, and I'll have it all winter. Because that's one way to cure it so it does well. Grov blue. So if you ever had gravlax, I make it out of bluefish. And on a bagel with red onions and cream cheese and scallions. Oh, it's so good.
Gonna compete with
So good.
Goldbergs.
So good. Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing. I like to, enjoy that whole thing. It's not being out in nature, catching some fish, to be able to enjoy seafood, and responsibly and sustainably. I think it's great.
And so of all of the kind of these nature stories that you share on your Instagram, what's been your favorite kind of theme or aspect of sea life to share?
You know what? I don't know if there's a one particular thing, but I think what I enjoy the most is when I share something and someone says to me, "I've been here for 60 years, and I never knew that." To me, it means you can always learn. I think that's like I said, it's hard for me to pick one exact, favorite, and because it changes daily sometimes. But I think it's just trying to show people something they've never seen before, especially when the old salt that's been fishing here for 60, and I got that comment a lot. I've been here fishing for 60 plus years, and I never knew that was every year. And now they see it because their eyes were open to it.
I feel like, I'll get questions about certain things, like people will ask me, and then you'll have already posted, like with the salps last summer, you'll be like, "Oh, that's what these are," and I'm like, "Okay."
I try to stay timely on my
You're very
posts.
timely. I have to
Try
say,
to keep up on it because again, I get a lot of messages. So when I start getting messages about a particular thing, I'm like, all right, time to answer that question because I'm sure if 5 people sent me a message, there's a lot more that probably have that same question. So and again, it gives people something to look for at different things that when they're at the beach, they're like, "Oh, those are those salps that fish guy talked about." And they'll tell their friend about it. So again, it gets contagious sometimes, like that knowledge, spreading the knowledge.
And have there ever been any questions or like what's one that you haven't been able to answer?
Oh, I get a lot of questions that I don't know the answer to, but I usually try to find the answer for, like I said, and one thing I will never tell you a lot, like I'm not going to just try to make something up because I'm an expert, and I am far from an expert. I don't even like to call myself, honestly, a marine biologist because I feel like I work with some marine biologists that, know way more than me, but then they come to me for stuff too. So, so I try to, like, if someone could ask me, I'm like, I have no idea, but I'm going to try and find out because then if I didn't know, I want to learn. So I could pass that on, and so yeah, there's been a few things that people have like sent me, like, what is this? And like, for example, there was this clear spider-looking like thing. It was probably about that big, and it was moving around on the deck of the boat, and I'm like, I had no idea what it was, and he got it in a canyon. He was 100 miles offshore. He scooped it up, and I'm like, what is this? So I looked in books. I couldn't figure it out, and I'm like, I got a buddy, my buddy Todd Gardner. He knows everything if I don't, So I sent him a picture. And he goes, "Oh, that's a spiny lobster larvae." So it was just a tropical drifter, but it was still drifting. It hadn't metamorphosed into its adult. But and then right away, I Googled that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that is it. I was, so I'm always finding stuff. So that's the thing, too. I tell a lot of those old salts, when they find something they haven't seen, send me a picture. Because if you hadn't seen it, you've been out there, especially commercial fishermen.
Yeah.
When they find something, they're like, what is this? That means it's weird. And that's my rule with a lot of my commercial fishing buddies is you find something that you don't know what it is, throw it on ice or keep it alive. It depends on the situation. I said, I want to see it, because there's so many cool things out there, and they're out there every day.
What do you think about the Montauk Monster?
Bloated raccoon. I like it to think it would be better, but yeah, it's just a bloated raccoon.
That's good. I want to open it up for questions.
Sure.
So,
can you talk about your bird?
My bird, Emmy.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the other many hats that I wear is I'm also a licensed falconer. So I have a red-tailed hawk that I go hunting with, and squirrels and rabbits. And as I mentioned earlier, if I say you can't eat it, you can't eat it. Like squirrel soup is a regular staple in my house. It's not like a oddity or a rare. Like let me get the guests freaked out. I'm going to serve squirrel soup. My mom for the longest time thought it was turkey soup because that's what I told her. Now she questions everything I feed her. But, I have a question. Yeah.
last year you had a photo on your Instagram page of a school of cow-nosed rays in Shinnecock Bay.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on how the expansion of this species into our marine environment can have an impact on our local ecosystem, and should we be concerned?
Yeah, so the cow-nosed ray is another one of those climate change population shift north. Very common in Maryland, Delaware, Chesapeake area, southern Jersey, but because things are warming, we're starting to see them more frequently here, to the point of like the school you're referencing, there was hundreds of them right by the Coast Guard station in Shinnecock. One of the things about them is they eat shellfish, and they burrow through the substrate looking for shellfish. So the first thing everyone is upset about or concerned about, I should say, is are they eating all the scallops? Because there's been a lot of problems with scallop die-off lately. And, part of the question was like, could they all be disappearing because of cow-nosed rays, Other things, are they disrupting eelgrass habitat? Again, we've had a hit with the brown tide. Now this critter coming in and mucking through the mud, is it uprooting eelgrass that, we're already having an issue with? So those are some of the things that are concerns. And, I know researchers at Stony Brook, the SOFO shark team has been looking into as well, trying to catch some of these animals, tag them, and try to see where they're going, what they might be feeding on, try to answer some of those questions, because again, we're seeing with more and more frequency here on Long Island. Yes.
I have a couple of friends who have seen mola in Gardner's Bay. Do you encounter them very much?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite fish to find, especially when I got people that don't know. So I love sharing stuff. So when I get, especially sharing in person, there's nothing better than that. And rolling up on a mola that's sitting there on the side, kind of floating sideways, and it's awesome. And it's for those that don't know, a mola, it's also called the ocean sunfish, and they can get over 1,000 pounds. They look like a fish head with no body. Yeah. Looks like something even bigger just bit the body off. And you got this big floppy head. And don't let them fool you. That fish that's, again, potentially 1,000 pounds can jump 3 feet out of the water. Wow. They'll often jump to knock parasites off, it's believed, or maybe communication. No one knows. But I mean, if I was a mola and can jump, I would. But yeah, they're just wild. And they eat jellyfish. So like circling back to the balloons, they often will eat balloons thinking that they're jellyfish. I don't know if I ever really talked about, like we talked about the balloon problem, but one of the issues with the balloons is things that eat jellyfish mistake them for it. The other one would be the leatherback sea turtle. And you would think, well, like a leatherback sea turtle, that's a smart animal, it would know a balloon. The problem is, imagine trying to eat a jellyfish, this slimy thing falling over your mouth. So they've adapted, they have like hair-like projections in their throat that kind of grab the jellyfish as they're swallowing it. So if they find a balloon, they try to eat it, they start swallowing it and they realize, oh, this isn't a balloon, but it's too late. They can't just easily spit it up, so they'll swallow it, cause a blockage, and potentially, in most cases, death. But they're really cool. Mostly ocean, but you'll see them definitely in Gardner's Bay. I've seen them in Shinnecock Bay more than once.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, yeah. One was kind of probably got pushed in more, or maybe got confused, but you'll find them in the bay often too. Yeah, really cool fish.
What's the most exciting thing going on at SOMAS right now?
Oh, well, the big thing level of excitement depends on where you're at with stuff. I would say the biggest work we're doing right now has to do with the wind farm project. They're doing a lot of, SOMAS has been hired to help put out a lot of the receivers and the acoustic arrays to try to monitor fish movements, whale movements, things like that among the wind farm and the lines running to and from. So
You mean off of Wainscott?
yeah. So they've been involved with a lot of that work. We've been doing quite a bit of work with humpback whales, monitoring their health. In fact, I just sat in on a dissertation of one of our graduate students who got her PhD yesterday, doing just that, flying drones over humpback whales and getting measurements so that you could see if they're healthy, how they're growing, which is really kind of exciting. We're doing a lot of work restoring Shinnecock Bay. So we've put in over 5 million adult hard-shell clams into western Shinnecock Bay. Since we started that program, we have not seen a brown tide in Shinnecock Bay, which is very promising. Since we started that program, the commercial harvest of hard-shell clams in Shinnecock Bay is up 1,000%. So it's kind of like putting the clams in the bank and the interest overflows into the rest of the bay, which fuels the ecosystem, the economy. I mean, I know for myself, I love getting clams on the house shell locally. They're delicious. So it's that whole, so there's been a lot of really good stuff. Right now, we're still going on, but we're winding up our kelp work. So we've been growing sugar kelp, working with local oyster farmers to, because the oysters and the clams, they're all there to help filter out harmful algal blooms, brown tide and whatnot. In the wintertime, those organisms kind of go into dormancy because the algal blooms die. But the nutrients are still there, and we are still flushing the toilet, putting nutrients into the bay. So one of the things we're working with is growing sugar kelp, which is a winter crop. It can grow an inch a day, and it uses those nutrients. So if you then harvest the kelp, you export the nutrients. So the idea is grow kelp, harvest it, and then that can then be turned into fertilizer. So instead of having it manufactured in a chemical plant, you grow it, you can fertilize, it goes in the back, it grow new stuff. So you're kind of like recycling the nutrients. We've worked with local restaurants to do with seafood, to working in the sugar kelp as a salad is delicious. We've worked with local vineyards using it as a fertilizer for their crops. So again, that's an exciting pilot thing that we're working with, and that's just this time of year. So yeah, we've got a lot of different stuff going
What about
on.
eelgrass, though?
So eelgrass also. So the Peterson lab is doing a lot of work.
Oh, good.
Monitoring the growth of the eelgrass, so it is expanding in Shinnecock Bay. They also collect the shoots, the seed shoots. So once the seeds are pollinated, they will collect those and then get the seeds back to the lab. And once they mature, germinate, they'll then seed the bay with more eelgrass. We have a lot of people doing predator-prey relationship within the eelgrass communities. So there's definitely a lot of work going on with eelgrass. Because again, eelgrass can help with fish populations. It locks the sediment in the ground in the bay, so you don't have turbidity, so the water is cleaner. It removes nutrients, so it does a lot of good things also. So sometimes fixing one thing can help the whole big picture of stuff. So
I think that's a great message for everyone to think about, like what we can do individually and how we can, affect change. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. If you want to, if you are not following Fish Guy Photos on Instagram or on YouTube as well,
I am on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo. I'm even on TikTok. I just don't dance yet.
Oh,
hear
yes,
that's where the
I
money
think I
is.
actually follow you on
hear that's where the
TikTok.
money is, so I might have to start dancing.
You need to
but-
do like a dance
yeah,
with the
little-
hawks or
yeah,
something.
little hawk dance or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am on all the social media. Instagram is my favorite. It's less nonsense to dig through. It's just pictures, and it's a lot more fun. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming
Thanks
on
for having
Southport
me. This was
Sea
great.
Farmers.
This was great.
Thank you.